In my last video, I covered using this camera, the Sony A7CR, for a week as my exclusive camera on travel in Mexico. If you want to see that video, it's linked above. But at the end of that video, I mentioned that I had bought this Sony 28mm f2 lens. And in this video, I want to tell you about how well that lens works with this camera and whether or not it would be a good option as an everyday camera lens or travel lens or urban or street photography lens. So we'll cover how well this works paired with the A7CR. Now, if you buy this camera, the A7CR, or indeed the A7C II, I think the main advantage of it is that it's a compact version of the larger Sony cameras. So the A7C II is a more compact version of the A7 IV, and this A7CR is a more compact version of the A7R5. So I think having a compact version really would indicate to me that it's useful, particularly for using with a compact lens, and that's why I've chosen to review this lens, the FE 28mm f2 lens. Now, I like a lens with a nice wide bright aperture on it. I think if you're going to have a full frame camera, then you want a wide aperture. Otherwise, I think you may as well go for an APS-C camera, and you would get the advantage then of a lighter camera and lighter lenses to put on it. But if you have a full frame camera, I think it makes sense to have a wide aperture. So I like the f2 aperture of this lens. And then as a personal opinion, I quite like shooting with a wide lens. So my favorite would be about 35mm. This lens is a 28mm lens, but given the 61 megapixel sensor that's in this camera, it's easy to crop in a bit. So this lens, I think, will serve me particularly well. You could indeed just program one of the buttons to move it into APS-C mode if you want to crop into 35mm, but then you still have the 28mm wider aspect ratio for when you want to use that. I have a number of other lenses that could be candidates for being paired with this A7CR. There is, for example, the 24-50 f2.8G lens, and that's the one that I took to Mexico with me, and it does offer the extra versatility that you get from a zoom lens, having a range of 24mm, which is wider than the 28, and being able to cut into 50mm as you need to. But this lens weighs in at 440 grams, whereas the 28mm weighs in at just 200 grams. So that's less than half the weight of the zoom lens. So that's one of the reasons why I think it pairs really well with this camera. There's also the 50mm f1.8, which is a great little lens. It's really light. It's even lighter than this 28mm lens. But it's a 50mm, and I find that just a little bit too tight for my everyday use. But it's a useful lens to bring along with you as an alternative on various occasions. And then looking at the social media channels, I see a number of people really favor the G Master lenses, like this 35mm f1.4 G Master lens, which is a great lens, and certainly it works well on the A7CR, but this is even heavier than the 24-50 G Master lens. So I really think it's not a good candidate if you want, the light and compact body. There's no point, in my opinion, in putting such a heavy piece of glass onto it. I prefer to work with the lighter lenses and take advantage of the fact that it's a small, compact and lightweight body that I'm using. I'm not doing a good job of putting that lens cap, that lens hood back on there. So anyway, I do think that this is a good option. There are others that I don't have. For example, Sony make a 35mm f1.8 lens. It's a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier than this, but I'd love to try it out and see how well it fits this camera. And then I note that Samyang have just announced a new 35mm f1.8 lens that is light and compact, and I'd love to try that one out at some point. But for the moment, it's a review of the 28mm f2, so let's see how well that worked. Well, having the camera out for a day, I found that there's a really nice balance to the camera with this particular lens. It just feels right, and it fits very easily into a small sling or pouch, something like that. It really takes up very little room. It's comfortable to use with you all day long, and it doesn't feel overly heavy like you might get with a larger piece of glass on your camera. I found when I was shooting that I was able to crop in where I needed a slightly tighter frame for my photographs, and if you crop into APS-C mode, for example, the 61 megapixels goes down to about 27 megapixels, but that's giving you the equivalent of a 42mm lens, which is pretty good. And then you could crop even further if you wanted, and you could go to 50mm, and that would give you 17 megapixels. Now, it depends on how you're going to use your images. If you need them for printing, then you really don't want to reduce your resolution too much at all. But if your images are for the web, for publishing online in almost any format, then 17 megapixels is more than enough to create a nice sharp image for posting on the web. I found that the resolution of the lens with this camera worked really well, and as you can see, if you zoom in to 100% here, they still appear to be pin sharp. This is at the center of the frame. Edge sharpness is not so critical to me at the outsides of the frame, particularly for posting online. Now, it's definitely important for printing, but for posting online, I think given how people view images online, I think that the 17 megapixels from this camera, or the edge sharpness that you get when you crop in, is absolutely good enough. Edge sharpness is an interesting thing because when you crop in, you're not actually using the edges of the extent that the lens is covering. So really, edge sharpness improves as you crop in, and center sharpness is really what you're getting overall your image. This image of the gentleman on the south bank relaxing was actually cropped in right to 6 megapixels, but you can see that it still presents absolutely fine online. Now, using a 28mm lens, I didn't know this man at all. I asked permission to take his photograph, but I didn't want to be right in his face with the camera. If I had a longer lens, I could have taken it from slightly further away, but I didn't want to cut in on the man's personal space too much. And so I held back and was able to crop in quite tightly, as you can see. But the image is really still absolutely fine for posting online. I also didn't have any problem at all with distortion from this lens. When you import your images into Lightroom, it automatically picks up the lens profile and corrects any distortion that might be in the optics of the lens. So really it's not terribly noticeable in any real life situation. So I don't worry about distortion for this lens either. Now, I did have one really curious problem with this lens when I was out shooting with it, and that is that I found on some occasions that I couldn't get it to open up beyond f2.8. It wouldn't go to the maximum aperture of f2, and I could not figure out for the life of me what was causing that. I even got to the point of asking ChatGPT and Gemini if they knew what might be causing it. They came back and suggested that maybe the lens has not communicated properly with the camera, and that I need to clean the sensors, switch off the camera, take the battery out, put it back in, remount the lens with the cleaned contacts on the lens and see if that fixes it. So I did that, but it didn't fix it. Then they suggested that maybe there was a fault with the lens. I had bought it second hand, and maybe there was a fault with it, in which case the blades are sticking and won't open beyond f2.8. But I knew that wasn't the case because I had shot some photographs at f2. I did find the solution in the end, and I'm not going to bore you with the gory details of that. But it turns out that I was using these K&F Concept magnetic filters on the camera from time to time. I have found them really handy to use. When you put these filters onto the camera, well, it turns out that Sony make an ultra-wide converter for this camera, which fits on the front of the lens. And the lens automatically detects the presence of that converter. The ultra-wide converter changes the lens from being a 28mm into being a 21mm lens, which could be useful at times, and maybe it's handy to have that adapter to put on it. The mechanism for detecting it must have something to do with magnetic contacts, because when you put the magnetic filters onto the camera, it automatically thinks that it has the 21mm ultra-wide converter on this, and that's why its maximum aperture wouldn't go beyond f2.8. So having found that, the problem is now solved. I guess that I need to buy some new filters because I can't use these really anymore in this camera. That's not a problem because it's a 49mm filter thread, and that fits the 50mm that I have, and it also fits the little RX1 camera that I have, which also has a 49mm filter thread, but it does mean I'm going to have to buy new filters. I really like to keep a UV filter on the camera at all times because I can use it in place of a lens cap. That means your camera is ready to shoot at any time that you pick it up without having to remove a lens cap from that. You don't need a UV filter on a digital camera because the sensor doesn't pick up UV anyway, but it acts as a great lens protector for you. And then I also like to use a circular polarizer because you can reduce reflections or increase them depending on what you want to achieve, and it also tends to darken the blue of the sky a little bit, and that can be nice for making the contrast with the clouds stand out. So I like to have a circular polarizer handy when I'm shooting. And then I sometimes use stronger neutral density filters for when I want to have a slow shutter speed and have an effect like smoothing out water or having some blur in the movement that's captured in the particular image. So I'll have to buy some new filters for that. So here are some of the other images that I shot on my trip along the South Bank. Hope you enjoy them. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, there are many other lenses that you could pair with this camera, and some of them make great candidates for being travel and everyday camera lenses. So I'd really love to hear your experience. What do you pair with your A7C II or your A7CR? How does it work for you? I'd love to hear about your preferences. Everybody's shooting style is different, and consequently their preferences for lenses can be different. So drop me a comment down below and I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.